Welcome back after that. We were busy discussing urban climates. Now, if you look at this graph, you can immediately see that the urban areas where the CBD is experience warmer temperatures than the surrounding rural areas. Now, in our next section, we're going to discuss the different types of settlements. In this case, you just need to pay attention to the CBD, and that's like towns and cities. And when we look at rural areas, it's like villages and hamlets, very small areas. That's countryside. Now, as you can see on this graph, you can see that the temperatures are much higher than the surrounding rural areas. And let's just quickly look at the factors that influence this difference in temperature. Now, when we look at the urban climates, we really discuss it's artificial. We say it's fake. The reason why is because there's so many elements that plays a role that the urban areas experience warmer temperatures. Now, if we just quickly have a look at it, now cities are usually 1 to 9 degrees Celsius warmer than the surrounding areas. And we're going to have a look at these factors that plays a role. The insulation is much less in cities than in rural areas. Now, who can tell me maybe why is because of that? Now, the insulation is the sun rays reaching the city areas. It might be because of the tall buildings. It might be because of the obstruction of buildings that the insulation can't reach the surface. But we will discuss that in the next couple of slides. The ultraviolet radiation, it's less. Now, they tell us why, because during winter, especially because of the high pollution levels. We looked at the pollution domes, for instance. The pollution domes we're going to discuss in a couple of slides even further. Cloud cover is actually more in urban areas than in rural areas. And I want to go to this last one that goes hand in hand with the cloud cover. There's more rainfall in city areas than rural areas, so chances for rain to develop is a bit better, and there's more dust because there's less vegetation and obviously construction taking place and building of infrastructure. But this is quite an interesting one for me if you look at the cloud cover and amount of rain, because in theory there needs to be, if you think about it, city areas have less open water surfaces and has less vegetation. Now, in order for cloud cover, what do we need? We need a high moisture content in the air. And by the look of things, there's more dust. There's more artificial heat being created over there. So am I right when I'm saying we kind of think of it, city areas experience a much drier type of air than the surrounding rural areas, because the rural areas are covered with vegetation. There might be big open water surfaces, like for instance dams for irrigation, etc. But there's more rain in urban areas. Now, the simple reason for it is because the urban areas experience warmer temperatures. And what do we know about, let's quickly draw our urban areas. If I can draw my urban areas over here. Let's say, there's my city areas over there. Okay. And over here is my rural areas. Now, because of the extreme warm conditions that's being experienced, and because of the artificial heat, we're experiencing rising air. But if you look in the table on the previous slide, there's more dust. Now, how is it possible for more, even though there's rising air, how is it possible for more cloud formation and more rain? The reason why is because of this rising air. Air is being sucked in from the rural areas. And what did we say about the rural areas? A lot of vegetation, a lot of open water surfaces. So this air that's being sucked in by the surrounding rural areas are getting sucked in over this city areas. And these air that's being sucked in consist of moisture. And when it getting sucked in and it rises, it cool condensed clouds. And that's why our city areas experience more rainfall. Now, our next topic, if we quickly look at it, what is a heat island? It's very simple. It's an area that experiences warmer temperatures than the surrounding rural area. Now, a heat island usually happens over city areas. Now, as you can see, if we quickly go back to this graph, look at the city area, the urban area. This is a heat island right over there. It's warmer than the surrounding rural areas. If you look at the definition on the slide, it's an area such as a city with constantly higher temperatures than the surrounding rural areas. Now, what creates this urban heat island? First of all, the buildings. It's basically what these buildings are made of. What does it do? It absorbs heat instead of reflecting heat. If you think of tar road surfaces, it's dark in color. What does it do? It gets hot during the day, it absorbs it. The concrete, most of the building material that's being used, concrete is basically used all over for building material. What does it do? It absorbs the heat. Now, another factor that plays a huge role in heat islands, if we look at urban areas like CBD, central business districts, for instance Johannesburg, you don't see many open water surfaces. You don't see many trees. It's covered with high-rise buildings. It's covered with tar road surfaces. And then the human activities plays a massive role over there. If you look at the amount of people that you find in a central business district like Johannesburg, for instance, keep in mind, think of the taxis. There's hundreds, thousands of taxis on the roads. I mean, during summer conditions, during winter conditions, what do people switch on? They switch on the air conditioners during there in their offices. It's the human activity, people eating, cooking food. All of this adds to the urban heat island. Now, in the rural areas, you don't see so many people concentrated in the same place. So I'm talking using motor vehicles. I'm talking cooking food, generate electricity, especially the big companies. For instance, not generating electricity, but using a lot of electricity, using the air cons, burning of fossil fuels to keep things going. For instance, generators, burning of petrol. Now, all of these factors creates this urban heat island because of the amount of people, the buildings that absorbs the heat, less open water surfaces, less vegetation, and the human activities causes temperature to be much higher in the CBD, central business district areas, and highly dense urban areas. Now, the heat islands are more common during winter. The simple reason why is because what happens, if I can draw a diagram down here, more artificial heat are being developed because people want to stay warm, and because we've got the Kalahari high pressure system over us. Now, if you look at city areas, if I draw my city over here, just want to use my brown pen. As you can see, the urban heat island, it takes a bit of a mushroom shape over here during the winter. The reason why is because the inversion layer is below. During winter, you've learned what's present over the interior of South Africa. The Kalahari high pressure system. Strong subsidence of the Kalahari high pressure system doesn't let any of the air escape. It's below the inversion layer. So what happens, this urban heat island is much more intense, it's much more concentrated, and the people living in these areas generate more heat from artificial instruments, like for instance the air cons to keep them warm. Okay, and because this pollution can't basically escape. And another reason why is it can't escape because there's less radiation. Why? Because we experience winter. The insulation is not as intense during winter months in South Africa like it is in summer months. So it intensifies during the winter months. Now, because during winter, basically what happens, we experience a pollution dome. Now, we've already discussed it. As you can see over there, especially during winter, there's your pollution dome. Let's say that's the Kalahari high pressure system, strong subsidence. And not even that, during nighttime, what does air do? It sinks. And as you can see, it intensifies this pollution dome. The pollution can't escape anywhere, but it's stuck over your urban areas. Now, this pollution also, like we discussed, can create fog. It's a mixture of fog and pollution. As you can see, there's your pollution dome. Now the air rises, but because it can't escape because of the inversion, a circulation of air taking place, being trapped all over the city areas. Now, what's the effects of pollution domes on people and the environment? Very importantly, acid rain. How this acid rain develops is basically because of the pollution, condensation takes place, and when it rains, it actually damages the buildings and can cause deforestation. Now, obviously in city areas, because of the amount of pollution in the air, it can create breathing systems like asthma because of the amount of pollution in the air. The smog, like we've already mentioned, is a mixture of fog and pollution, can create breathing difficulties, also things like lung disease, etc. And the less radiation means less incoming solar radiation because of the cloud cover that's being formed because of the acid rain. Now, how can we reduce this heat island effect? But when we reduce it, we need to do it in such a sustainable way. And this term that I want to use over here, sustainable. What does it mean? Sustainable means to be able to preserve for future generations. That's what it means. We need to do it in such a way that we don't cause further harm. Now, ways to reduce this heat island, to bring this temperature down in urban areas and central business districts, there's a couple of points that we made over here. First one is green belts. What is the green belts areas? It's basically parks, recreation areas that the city develops in urban areas. It's where usually people go for picnics or just to go and relax, to take a stroll, walk their dogs. Now these green belts creates cooler temperatures for urban areas. Why does it create cooler temperatures? Because of the amount of vegetation. There might be open water surfaces like dams where people can enjoy themselves. Now this have a cooling effect on urban heat islands. The second point, you've heard about deforestation, but now it's afforestation. Afforestation is planting more trees, planting more plants. I mean, let's use Johannesburg CBD as an example. On the paved ways, why don't we create pot plants over there? Or more small open water surfaces, and where places people can sit and enjoy themselves. So we need to plant more in order to bring down that urban heat island effect. Then a third point is the way we design our buildings these days. We need to do it in such a way being sustainable. Instead of using concrete, dark color materials to build up buildings that absorbs the heat, and obviously this absorption of heat creating warmer urban areas. Rather use light colors. Maybe use glass to reflect the insulation so it doesn't create this absorbing effect that makes the temperature go higher in urban areas. Now, another initiative that can work great in inner city areas is rooftop gardens. Rooftop gardens, it can be scenic as well. People can enjoy it. And we can even take it a step further. There's so many dilapidated buildings in Johannesburg. Why don't we cover the rooftops with gardens? Even go further, why don't we farm on top of these rooftops? And that way we can be even more sustainable and we can create jobs in the distant future. Now, a very important point for me, and I feel South Africans lack this. And because many people still use their own transport, and people do use public transport, but I don't believe our public transport system is adequate. Now, for example, let's say for instance we use a bus system. How many people can get roughly on a bus? 60 people? Now imagine the amount of pollution that's being created by one bus or 60 cars. Not only does all these cars create congestion and traffic, but it creates much more pollution as well. So we need to have a look at that, and we can even be more sustainable. Many of the European countries went the total green route, means environmentally friendly. In their cities, they created bicycle lanes. Instead of people using public transport like taxis or their own cars, they created these bicycle lanes so people can actually cycle to work. Now, cycling to work is not only going to benefit your health, but it's also going to reduce this urban heat islands effects. Now, this was our last section of climatology. If we looked at it, we discussed the aspects is your north and south facing slopes. We looked at our valley climates. For instance, valley climates are katabatic and anabatic breezes. We looked at our high pressure systems, your anticyclones, Kalahari, South Indian, South Atlantic. We looked at our travelling disturbances, like the Bergwinds and the line thunderstorms. This covered our climatology section. In our next section, we're going to continue with geomorphology. I'll see you in the next lesson.